I think everyone is here. I would again like to welcome you all. Today we are here for the webinar on Turkey's undoing of the Kemalist project and its tremors on the geopolitics of the Islamic world and beyond. Bipindra Ji from Law and Society Alliance is the host, and I'm your moderator. I'll be introducing the speakers today. So we have Dr. Ahmet S. Yayla today. Dr. Yayla is a 20-year veteran of the Counterterrorism and Operations Department in the Turkish National Police and served as the Chief of Counterterrorism in Şanlıurfa, Turkey between 2010 and 2013. Currently, he is the adjunct professor at DeSales University and Director, Center for Homeland Security. Yeah, Dr. Yayla has published both scholarly works and written or co-written numerous articles related to counterterrorism and homeland security. We have Ambassador Anil Trigunayat. Ambassador Trigunayat is a career diplomat. He has served as Indian ambassador to Libya, Malta, and Jordan. He also served in the Indian missions in Bangladesh, Mongolia, USA, Russia, Sweden, Nigeria, Libya, Malta, and Jordan. In the Ministry of External Affairs, he worked in the Economic, West Asia, North Africa, Gulf, and Consular divisions. He also served as Director General, Joint Secretary for the Gulf and Hajj divisions in the Ministry of External Affairs. Thereafter, Mr. Trigunayat worked as Deputy Chief of Mission and the rank ambassador in the Embassy of India, and he is working on the board of advisors of BRICS Chambers of Commerce and Asia-Africa Chambers of Commerce. Today we are here to discuss a very, very critical issue which is having a major impact on the geopolitics of the Middle East and even beyond that. Yes, we are going to discuss Turkey. What has happened in Turkey after 2000? Are we going to witness the end of the Kemalist project? We are also witnessing a leadership transition in the Middle East in the form of proxy wars between Turkey and Saudi Arabia in Libya. Besides that, there are many opinions circulating around Turkey and the links with the ISIS. So we have very eminent speakers today with us to enlighten us on all these critical issues. I'll begin with Dr. Yayla. Over to you, Dr. Yayla.
Thank you for the introductions and thank you for inviting me. Hello, dear Ambassador. I hope everybody is doing well. So what I would like to start is how Erdogan slowly established his rule and shifted the Turkish Islam from traditional Sufi Islam based on the teachings of the great poet Rumi that was being practiced during the Ottoman times towards a Salafi understanding of Islam, basically a political Islam based on the teachings of mostly Muslim Brotherhood understanding of Islam. And there is a reason for that, because Erdogan has a solid base of 30%, the Turks who are supporting him and voting for him, but he needs more than 30% to stay in power. And for Erdogan, it is a matter of survival, because if he does not stay in power, he knows he is going to get prosecuted, and he knows he's going to, and his family are going to get jailed, imprisoned, because of the corruption and other atrocities they were involved. So therefore, he from the beginning knew that he had to stay in power regardless of what. With that, first he had to speak to that 30%, telling them, hey, I am here for you. If I am not, you are not going to be able to practice your religion. This is a matter of religion. It is not about politics. It is about me staying in power and protecting your religion. One of the best examples we can see is the Hagia Sophia opening, basically from museum to a mosque. And also this is directly associated with this messaging, again going directly to his base and telling them, see, I am working for you, I am thriving Islam, therefore support me regardless of what. On the other hand, when we look at Erdogan's practices, claiming he is a pious Muslim, we do not see the Islamic practices he is openly carrying out. The most important Islamic principles written in the Quran and experienced through the life of the Prophet Muhammad, the great example for the Muslims, we do not see them in Erdogan. He is deeply corrupted. He often lies. These even two sins are the biggest sins in the Quran. Lying is against the religion, against the heart of the religion. But what we see here is Erdogan using the religion itself to promote his political agenda and to make sure that he is going to stay in power. That's number one. Number two, he knows that that 30% base is not enough for him to stay in power. Therefore, he needs to be able to speak to at least another 20-something% of the Turks to support him. Of course, besides all these activities, political activities, he also carries out different dirty games with the elections. That's another issue. But he knows that he needs support. That 20% of the Turks are oftentimes mostly the nationalist Turks. They are conservative, but not as practicing Muslims as his own base. Therefore, he needs to be able to talk to those people through his actions. The best examples are his atrocities he is carrying out against the Kurds, the operations Turkey is involved in northern Syria and now in Libya. Those operations are basically means of messaging with the nationalist Turks and asking them to support him because he is leading the cause and he is driving Turkey against its enemies in the region. So these are the most basic issues from his perspective when it comes to justifying his actions. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. So do you want me to continue or?
So what I'll do is that I'll just come back to you, Dr. Yayla.
Okay.
Yeah. So before that, I'll invite Ambassador Trigunayat. Sir, you have a long experience of that area, and like Turkey is also becoming very relevant to India also in the recent context, and we also see a kind of an alliance or a new axis emerging, which is Turkey, Pakistan, Iran, Qatar. Do you see it's kind of a new geopolitical restructuring of the Middle East? I mean, this is one question which I would like you to address, but please feel free to speak whatever you feel like. And Dr. Yayla, I'll come back to you regarding Turkey's, interest in the Libya and ties with the ISIS. Ambassador.
Thank you, Abhinav. Congratulations for the Usanas Foundation and for organizing this conference. Professor Dr. Ahmet Yayla and friends. I would like to deliberate on President Erdogan's Turkey and the determinants and direction of his muscular foreign policy, marked by foreign interventions like in Syria and Libya, and some of the regional and domestic compulsions, apart from his own personal sultanist Islamist beliefs, including larger-than-life ambitions of Ottomanic proportions. I agree fully with Professor Yayla that the recent controversy over Hagia Sophia Mosque is a manifestation of that quest for religious leadership, both in domestic and international context. Ottoman Empire had a remarkable sway over a large part of the world that in the modern context has its own trials and tribulations, as well as geoeconomic and geopolitical competition. Its successor state had the great benefit of a reformist, modernist, and revolutionary in Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. Turkey is coming closer to the centennial celebrations of Ataturk's establishment of the modern Turkish state, while 100 years of the Ottoman Empire sunset just passed away. During the last decades, under Erdogan's leadership as prime minister or president, Turkey has continuously grown economically, and in spite of certain domestic divisions, and I would refer to the coup in July 2016, he succeeded in strengthening an important regional geopolitical position and sought to become a global geopolitical power. Although Ankara denies officially it seeks the restoration of the Ottoman Empire, President Erdogan's political and military moves would state it otherwise. I mean, his party essentially, as mentioned by Dr. Yayla also, that it is essentially started with Wahhabi Islam, and the Turkey, which was very well known for, or is still known for Sufi Islam, has taken a back seat because what he's trying essentially is to get the religious leadership across the world, Islamic leadership, because there is a vacuum. Saudi Arabia is having its own major problems, and Arab Spring has thrown up new challenges for the monarchical regimes. And since Muslim Brotherhood came to power in Egypt, as we know, and later on what happened to President Morsi was another major problem, and Turkey has continued to support him. It is because Muslim Brotherhood is a foreign policy arm also of Turkey. And Turkey has several unique advantages, apart from its geopolitical advantage, geo-economic advantage, and geostrategic advantage. But I believe that in 2002, that when he came to power, at that time, I believe he used to be the mayor of Istanbul, right? And there, when he tried to speak of secularism, Islam, this thing, and then he was arrested. And then he created, since then, he has tried to strengthen his Islamic base by learning from what happened to his predecessor. And since then, he has not looked back. And in fact, all over the world, he has tried to create, he's not either spreading the kind of Islam Saudi Arabia does, or the Islam that Shia Islam that Iranians do. But at the same time, it is trying to provide a muscular Islam in a different sense of the term, where people can find some kind of a leeway, or they can attach themselves to the remarkable. For this purpose, he has made these huge palaces, huge infrastructure, big airports, and now he's thinking of one channel. And unfortunately, his domestic base is reduced. Now, as you know, the foreign policy is often, and most likely, is a projection of the domestic compulsions or the domestic requirements of any country. And if there is a problem within the country, then obviously you need to find some kind of a machoistic attitude to give inputs to give to the foreign policy, and that is seen in its overt interventions in Syria repeatedly, and in Iraq or elsewhere, where the Kurdish problem, whether it is the Syrian on its side, whether it is Libya for the Islamist people. I mean, and Libya, of course, has a very different connotations for it, and a geopolitical advantage, especially in its how to say, Mediterranean quest for oil and gas, and by he signed an agreement last year with Libya for dividing essentially between the two the Mediterranean coast, and that is something that has not been agreed to by Egypt or by Cyprus or by Israel, or for that matter, because they also, and Greece, which is opposing it fully. So what has happened is, it is a major NATO power with the second largest army and a very sophisticated, very good soldiers and good fighters and good generals, but at the same time, it is stretching it a bit too far, because it is not an insider. It is, whether it's in the EU, it has tried to continue to work from 1996 onwards, but it has not got into that. It is, of course, a lot of missteps that have happened, and that is why now it is also challenging several European countries in its quest, whether it is in Syria or elsewhere. The question is with the US also. We have seen that President Erdogan, though has a reasonably good relationship with Trump, he tried to have problems with him for the bishop. And eventually, the Turkey was pushed with certain sanctions, and the problems happened. Eventually, he resolved. But today, if you come to think of it, in Libya, it is the U.S. which is carrying U.S.'s behest. The Turkey is supported by Qatar and U.S. Apart from Italy in Libya. In Syria, it is directly in confrontation with Iran and with Russia in the big way, and that is what is causing it a bit of a problem. But somehow, I must say that he has been able to find a modus vivendi with President Putin, again a very strong man, and also with the Iranians. And so the new now that we are seeing with the post-Arab Spring, there is a problem that is happening within the churn that is happening within the Middle East, and the Sunni Arab states and the Shia Sunni crescent and the problems between them, Iran and Saudi Arabia, Iran and US, those problems have taken a very different turn now. All on the other hand, between Qatar, which supported the Muslim Brotherhood in Turkey, now that has become a kingpin in many ways, because Turkey immediately came to the help of the Qataris and set up its base there, and today it's a very strong base from where it can operate very well, apart from its bases in Somalia and Iraq and elsewhere. So Turkey is the only thing is one can see today's complex is that Turkey is one country that is able to flex its muscles very strongly, very expediently, and at a much faster pace in different parts of the world. Whether it is spreading itself too thin remains to be seen. We do not know. But I must say that within the country, his support base has reduced, as we have seen in the last elections, as well as there was an article which I read in Foreign Policy, and the heading was Turkey's Generation Z turns against Erdogan. Now, this is an interesting thing because he gave a lecture or a talk online on June 26th, which was disliked by more than 422,000 YouTubers and social sensitive youth because they are not happy with the way the country is going, and they started writing "No vote for you." Well, when these kind of campaigns do materialize or do get translated into the votes remains to be seen. But whatever we may say, I mean, despite the emergence of robust Islam in the country, I believe that the people identify themselves more with the secular traditions, with a moderate kind of Islam, and generally very modern outlook the people have there. And that is the saving grace of Turkey and its leadership in a longer way, long-term way. I must say that in 2000, when he almost was there, when he was being arrested, he recited a poem, Turkish poem, and which will explain to you what he thought. And the poem read like, the mosques are our barracks, the domes are helmets, minarets are our bayonets, and the faithful are soldiers. So he has championed that, and as Dr. Yayla also said, that this has helped him to an extent keeping his basic base intact. And he has continued with this. But one more thing you have to look at it is that in the first decade of the 21st century, if you look back, that Turkey is one country that has proved first time in history that a country led by a political party rooted in Islam can successfully steer it and keep the Islam as consonant with democracy and Islam with capitalism. I mean, that is something, so far one has thought that these are incompatible and non-sustainable. But this is something that Turkey has shown, that their democracy, there are always some accusations of vote rigging and all that, but then it has come to say that. And in fact, when he was in Washington, and I must quote him, what he said essentially for the Western clients, but he was very straightforward in his discussions, and he said Turkey wants to take its political Magna Carta, which is synthesis between Muslim identity and modern values, much further by becoming an active leader in promoting modern values to give the world a new and inspiring Renaissance perspective. How far that is true will have to be judged on a broader spectrum. Now, in a world of rising tensions today between Russia, China, and the United States, the Middle East, and Europe, Sunnis, Shiites, Islamists, liberalists, Turkey is also at the epicenter. And at that epicenter of Turkey is also the populist and right-wing President Erdogan. So he has been using all diplomatic means, including his military, to solidify Turkey as a regional power. Whenever there is an opposition or dissent in the country, he has used the most brutal means to silence it. And we have seen it several times. What happened in the 2016 coup, when a purge was done, what happened to Gulen movement, what happened to coup plotters, to Kurdish nationalists. So there are key numbers of examples. Another thing that I would like to bring about is that Syria, obviously, we know that it is continuing very strongly, not to give the leeway. It is against Assad now, and he had a love-hate relationship with him over the years. But today he's in a position where they are able to create a buffer zone. He has used also the large number of refugees that have come as a bargaining chip and a bargaining tool with the European countries for extracting advantage. Being a NATO member country, it creates a very major problem for the NATO countries themselves. If Turkey goes and attacks a country, and then those countries, whether under their articles, expected to come back and in support of it. Of course, its foreign policy is also very diverse, because occasionally you will find that he's trying to take a very overtly defined policy to the US and others. For example, when he tried to import or place an order for S-400 shield with Russia, or going ahead with the Astana process for Syria and in different places. Likewise, he also challenged the US supremacy in different parts of the world, and it has not supported the sanctions against Iran. So it does take its own decisions very often, perhaps in the hope that since it has the power and the support of the NATO countries, at least in principle, and so it continues to deal with those kind of situations. And its foreign policy, as you know, the certain major drivers have been that what it does about the consolidation of Kurdish military and political power in northern Syria, rivalry with Iran, Saudi, Egypt, UAE, Russia, collaboration with some of them, the security and policy challenges that are posed by the ISIS, and including terrorism, which it uses to its advantage as well. Because 2012, I was in Libya, and at that time, after the revolution and killing of Gaddafi, all the Western countries and the regional countries like Saudi, UAE, Qatar, they were all on the same side, wanted to support the Free Syrian Army. So large number of the Libyan fighters and the fighters from other countries who had come there, Islamists mainly, and Al-Qaeda and all kinds of groups, they were all transported via Turkey to Syria to fight there. And this is how it was created, the whole problem. Libya at that time openly said that they will provide $20 million and 20,000 soldiers. Today, the tables have turned. Turkey has been, and it is reported by various sources, including the UN, that it has been sending the Syrian fighters back to Libya to fight there. And in some places, the Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and all are there. They are all supporting them. The Islamist group in the western part of Libya, it is supporting that group under the garb of that it is a UN supported or internationally supported regime of Assad. So I believe that it has made a great impact in this. It has tried to present itself as a major Islamic power, a resurgent power, and it is trying to create the kind of sort of situation for the European and the NATO countries as to how they are going to handle this situation. Now, whether Turkey has bitten more than it can chew, only time will tell. But I believe that it is an extremely important country, very what I should say is a very militarily strong country. Today, it is also a leader in the drones, and it has been supplying all over. It has become very strong in the cyber attacks. It has become a champion, actually, because the Gulf countries, in collaboration with Israel, have mainly GCC countries, have tried to take a backseat on the issue of Palestine. And so, therefore, it is trying to champion the cause of the Palestinians. So, it is creating a new, in view of the maximalist pressure policies of the Americans. Today, what one is seeing is that while Israel and the GCC countries are getting closer, there is a new axis that is emerging, and that axis happens to be Turkey, Russia, Iran, even though themselves, and China, of course, because today China is looking for it. So far, it has only economic interests in the Middle East. It was increasing its footprint, but today it is growing. And Turkey is a very important component in its outreach to Europe and in its BRI project. So Russia, of course, after Syria has highly emboldened, it is back in action. It counts everywhere in the Middle East for anything. So what we are seeing, even though in certain places like Libya, Russia is on one side and Turkey on the other, but given the relationship between Putin and Erdogan, they have been able to resolve these issues. As far as India is concerned, we have seen that it is not from now, but since the time that the D8 was founded by Erbakan with all the Muslim Islamic countries in our region, and Pakistan used to be a major mover of that. And Turkey has blindly supported Pakistan, provided all kinds of arms, equipments, support to them. But Pakistan is also divided between the Arab Sunni countries like UAE and Saudi, very heavily dependent on them. But for Turkey, but also depends on Turkey, and that is why you know that they tried to create a new Islamic organization as a counter to the OIC, which was of course not very successful. But this remains his dream. This is what he wants to try. And today he's on the other side. Turkey and Saudi Arabia, despite their relations or whatever, they are always on a fighting. They are supporting the counter parties, and therefore one would see that we are looking enhanced role by Turkey uh, in uh, in the Middle East and in other theaters of war. And India, of course, will be affected by all this. And we have seen their overt statements, whether it is on Kashmir or whether it is on Article 370, whatever. And we have seen that India has also taken an action to counter it economically where it can, and which is not a very good thing. But we hope that that Erdogan will realize his limitations and he'll not continue to force solutions of his choice and of his thinking over the rest of the countries. And I only hope that the Libyan crisis does not further escalate into a major war between Egypt on the one hand, supported by various European countries, and Turkey on the other. That would call for a very major change in the dynamic in the MENA region. I'll stop there, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Ambassador Trigunayat, for an excellent overview and analysis of the emerging situation. I'll come back to you, but before that, I would like to request Dr. Yayla to highlight some of the issues. Dr. Yayla, in one of your articles, which you wrote with Colin Clark in Foreign Policy, I guess, you mentioned in detail about the linkages of like Erdogan's son-in-law with the ISIS fighters, the oil the sale of the purchase of the oil. Besides that, from 2013 to 2016, I think either Turkey was lax or pessimistic towards the foreign fighters traveling via Turkey to Syria and Iraq. Besides that, there was also a mention of Turkey being the choke point of all the IED explosives used by ISIS in Syria and Iraq. And yes. So my question is that, I mean, what is this? This overt or covert support for ISIS? Is it just a strategy to contain Kurds, or there are some deep-rooted ideological sympathies with what ISIS is doing? Second point, you also mentioned that all the foreign fighters are moving to Turkey. So with this whole extremism getting stronger in Turkey, what is the likely future of Turkey? Will it be going Pakistan way, where you have Islamists and extremists holding a very strong position in the country? Please, sir.
Thank you. So yes, Turkey has been openly and secretly supporting not only ISIS but also other Salafi jihadist terrorist organizations and groups in Syria. It all started openly with the Free Syrian Army, and at the time, just like the rest of the world, the support for the Syrian army, Free Syrian Army, was accepted because people were fighting and rising up against the atrocities of Bashar Assad. And it was understandable. And it wasn't only Turkey, but the rest of the world were also supporting the Free Syrian Army. And it wasn't an ideological movement. It was mostly established on the protection of local people from the rapes, killings, and torture of Bashar Assad's army. However, in 2013, as the Salafi jihadi movements started to take over, including Al-Qaeda affiliates like Jabhat al-Nusra, and then ISIS, of course, we started to see, and they quickly defeated the Free Syrian Army. At that point, Turkey decided to fully support those movements. It was both covert and overt support. It wasn't only closing its eyes through its security and intelligence forces, but also getting in touch and interacting with those organizations and supporting them in any way Erdogan could by using the intelligence services. I was the chief of counterterrorism in Şanlıurfa at the border. Şanlıurfa was considered as the endpoint of jihadi highway. There is a good reason for that it was labeled as the jihadi highway because over 60,000 ISIS members joined ISIS by traveling Turkey. And unfortunately, they were not stopped. They were encouraged. They were let go. In fact, the orders coming from Ankara, from the Erdogan's government to the local governorships was to let them be. It was so open that 3 Somalian guys went to a Turkish border checkpoint and told the officers at the gate that they were going to join ISIS, so they should let them go past to Syria. So think about the perception of the terrorist organization's members. They were so comfortable in passing the borders without being interrupted. So that was an official policy, and it was openly conveyed and passed to the local officers at the border. In fact, it was almost like the biggest crime to carry out operations against those terrorist organizations between 2013 and 2016. When you look at the statistics, there was no single operation against any Al-Qaeda affiliates in Turkey. And anti-ISIS operations were basically the interactions between the law enforcement and ISIS members where the police had to arrest them because they found weapons, or it was very clear that they were going to carry out terrorist attacks. However, the numbers were very limited. And that's the reason behind that, because Erdogan made it clear that officers understood ISIS was untouchable in Turkey. And they will bring the issue that ISIS carried out attacks in Turkey. Yes, they did. But if you look at those attacks, they were mainly against the Kurds, against the Kurdish minority in Turkey, almost all of them. In Ankara, in Suruç, Şanlıurfa, and other places, we see ISIS attacks, and they targeted the Kurdish minorities. And there is also a good reason behind that. In fact, the German intelligence through European Union, through a European Union report, published their intelligence analysis that there was a hidden agenda and cooperation between ISIS and Turkish intelligence, and those Ankara and Suruç attacks were through that collaboration. We know through the court documents that the perpetrators of Ankara bombing, where hundreds of people wounded and over 100 people were killed, were being followed by the Turkish intelligence. The same day the bombing happened, they could stop that person, but they ignored, and they let that person to do those two terrorists carry out the attacks. So yes, that cooperation existed from the beginning, and that was one of the reasons President Erdogan dragged his foot to be part of the coalition against ISIS when President Obama asked him. Instead, he said, no, I cannot do anything. I cannot fight in Syria. And with that, the United States went to the SDF and YPG and aligned themselves to carry out operations against ISIS in Syria. So therefore, Erdogan's intentions were very open, and he wanted to use these terrorist organizations to increase his influence in the region as the leader of the Sunni world, because these organizations in most cases are not in good relationships with some of those Gulf countries, including the leadership of Saudi Arabia. They do not have close and good relationships. But when it comes to Turkey, it was very obvious that Turkey was using these organizations for its own geopolitical objectives. One was using ISIS against the YPG and the Kurds in Syria. And the second was basically based on Erdogan's Islamic ambitions. When we look at 2013 and 2014, Erdogan was rallying in the region as the leader of the Islamic world, visiting several different countries, talking to people, and his advisors were essentially telling him, hey, you are the leader of the Sunni Islam, you are like a neo-Ottoman caliphate, you are going to establish the new caliphate, so we have to use these organizations for our purposes to extend our influence in the region. With that, ISIS started to establish logistical support networks in Turkey. They acquired all the explosives, the materials they were building their explosives from Turkey or through Turkey, and they were never stopped. When the things were really open in the air and the United States started to pressure Turkey in 2016 to cease its support to ISIS, Erdogan started to slow down the flow of ISIS fighters, but it was never completely interrupted. There are some statistical numbers the Turkish government loves to push to the public in terms of how many ISIS terrorists they arrested and how many of them remain in Turkish prisons. As of today, there are around 1,000 ISIS members in Turkish prisons. Half of them are Turks, half of them are from different countries. But that number is nothing, because after the defeat of ISIS, several foreign fighters went back to Turkey. They are hiding in Turkey. There are hundreds of ISIS cells in Turkey. And if we consider the fact that they are still openly and very easily carrying out their activities inside the country, we can understand how small that number is. There are around 9,000 Turkish people who joined ISIS. And there are only around 400 something of them were arrested. If you look at the other numbers, for example, there are around 10,000 PKK members compared to 1,000 ISIS members in Turkish prisons. There are over 50,000 people who were arrested based on the coup charges, basically being on the opposing side of Erdogan, claiming that those people were somehow doctors, lawyers, judges, prosecutors were involved with the coup, whereas not. Basically, Erdogan has been using the coup as an opportunity to go after his opponents and arrest them, including women and children. So therefore, the existence of those Salafi jihadi terrorist organizations worked very well for the ambitions of Erdogan. He openly and closely supported them. In fact, when the infamous MIT, Turkish National Intelligence trucks carrying military-grade weapons to Syria were stopped by the Turkish National Police on the Adana highway, Erdogan got very upset and he openly claimed in the TVs that those weapons, those trucks were carrying humanitarian aid to Syria. They were going to go to the Syrian Turkmen people. There was medicine in those trucks and the police did not have any business to involve in the secret state operations. But when a judge ordered the search of those trucks, what the police saw was medicine boxes on top of the cargo, but underneath the first layer of medicine boxes, there were military-grade weapons. On top of these findings, the Syrian Turkmens came out and said they have never received such cargo from Turkey and those trucks were not heading to the Syrian Turkmens, including Turkish nationalist parties, high-level members who came out and said, no, these trucks were not going to Syrian Turkmens. What happened? Erdogan made sure that those trucks went to Syria, and then eventually he made sure that the police officers, judges, and prosecutors who were involved in the stopping of those trucks were arrested and put in prison. So under Erdogan's regime, the Turkish National Intelligence is openly involved with these Salafi jihadi terrorist organizations, and they are using the state tools to extend Erdogan's influence in those areas, not only in Syria, but now in Libya. We also need to understand, to justify his actions, Erdogan deliberately has driven his base or Turkish Muslims towards Salafi jihadi understanding of Islam. There are surveys out there comparing the past and present of the Turkish public when it comes to their perception of Salafi jihadism and these terrorist organizations. For example, around 10% of the Turks do not consider ISIS as a terrorist organization. They consider their actions as justifiable, and they openly basically say that they support ISIS. Now, when we look at these numbers, it accounts for around 7 million Turks. That means ISIS can use those 7 million Turks as a base in Turkey because they sympathize with their terrorist organizations. And this is also true for Al-Qaeda. For years after the year 2000, Al-Qaeda struggled to find a base in Turkey because the Turkish Islam was not open to Salafism. The Turks did not like how the Salafis twisted the religion and how they were interpreting the Quran very harshly and literally. It was completely against the Sufi understanding of Islam. It was not peaceful. It was not open to dialogue. But Erdogan, through his actions and through the Diyanet, the Turkish religious authority, made sure that slowly but surely Turkish Islam experienced a shift from traditional Sufism towards Salafi understanding of Islam. And this was necessary for Erdogan as he considers himself as the warrior caliph for the religion. He needed a base whose understanding of Islam was shifted with these new Salafi ideologies who would welcome him to support these terrorist organizations openly and covertly.
Thank you, Dr. Yayla. Hello.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah.
Should I continue or?
I have two questions. Some of the facts which you mentioned, they are absolutely shocking and very alarming for the Indian observers, because we look at ISIS from a very, I would say, distant, point of view. And we never had a very serious ISIS problem because in India, the Sufi Islam was a major deterrent against, this Salafism, Wahhabism. And if you compare like the overall size of the Muslim population, the total number of people who joined ISIS, that is minuscule. But the things which you are mentioning, they are absolutely shocking. So I have two questions. In muted tones, many people are talking. In fact, I myself wrote in Haaretz that this is some kind of a revival of caliphate by 2023. I mean, these are murmurs, rumors. Second, so first, how far that is true? Secondly, President Erdogan recently threatened Europe that I'll flood your streets with 3.6 million refugees. And then you just mentioned about this rising tide of Salafism and Wahhabism in Turkey. Now, in case, first of all, what happens to Turkey if Erdogan future declines, or what after Erdogan? Is Turkey going to
So there
become?
is,
Yeah.
from the understanding of Erdogan, there is no such a thing after Erdogan. He will
Okay.
stay in power regardless of what. That we need to understand, because he knows if he loses power, he's going to prison. So therefore, he is going to stay in power regardless of what. That's a given. So he is going to do anything to stay in power. We need to understand that he is not going anywhere through elections. That's number one. Number two, what we need to understand to better see where we are going and what Erdogan is aiming is the international activities of Erdogan's establishments. Among them, of course, the Turkish National Intelligence, operating in different countries extensively, more than ever, with many agents trying to help Erdogan to boost his influence in different countries, including the West and the East, including India. But beyond the Turkish National Intelligence, what we see, like the Turkish Religious Authority, historically, this was an independent body, only promoting the practice of Islam unpolitically, without being involved in the real politics of the country. The main objective of the Diyanet, Turkish Religious Authority, was the promotion of Islam in people's lives. So how could people become a better person, a better Muslim? But with Erdogan, that shifted towards an understanding of political Islam, how people can support Erdogan instead of how people can be a good Muslim. So what we see now, Diyanet promoting that understanding instead of the religion. Under Erdogan, the numbers of the people who pray daily dropped significantly. We see a sharp increase in the numbers of the people who considers themselves as atheists. So under normal circumstances, one could think that, okay, Erdogan is promoting Islam, therefore there are going to be more people who are becoming more religious, right? But it is just the opposite. People are started to have a cold feet towards the religion because of what they are seeing coming from Erdogan. It is basically backfiring and driving people away from the religion. So therefore, Diyanet, with this attitude, carries out international operations. There are over, I think, 15,000 Diyanet members, imams, and other people who are working abroad. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, so who are working abroad and basically promoting Erdogan's agenda, and also acting as state intelligence officers and collecting information and intelligence about Erdogan's opposition. This is happening in the United States. It is happening in in different European countries, in Northern Africa and elsewhere. So Erdogan is using international Diyanet establishments for its own political objectives instead of teaching people the real Islam. The third is there are different international aid groups that operates under Erdogan, and those aid groups like IHH, which is also active in India and in the region, International Humanitarian Aid Organization, are openly promoting Salafi understanding of Islam. They are directly in touch with the Salafi jihadists in the countries where they are operating, and they are using their facilities and the means of transportation to support different terrorist organizations, as in the case with IHH for its Syrian operations. They were helping the Al-Qaeda to move their logistical support, and also in some cases with ISIS, as we have seen in some of the wiretappings which were leaked to the media. So with the combination of those three elements and the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs activities in the world, where we are heading is basically a big organization of Muslims, minority Muslims, living abroad and pushing them towards a greater support to the Erdogan regime, claiming that Erdogan is going to represent the Islam, the religion of Islam, and the Muslims very soon. Turkey is reviving its historical position. Therefore, they should support Erdogan. It is, as written by Erdogan's supporters in the media, the greatest Islamic duty and obligation, a religious obligation, to support Erdogan as the leader of Muslims. In fact, in 2011, when I was the chief of counterterrorism in Şanlıurfa, Erdogan with his wife and a large delegation visited Şanlıurfa. I was in charge of his protection because I was the chief of counterterrorism. And his wife, Emine Erdogan, had a lunch with the top officers, government officers, spouses in Şanlıurfa. And my wife was present at that meeting. Emine Erdogan told to the wives of top officials in Şanlıurfa that his husband was the chosen one, he was the Messiah, and for that, people should support him. For that, the women in that lunch, in that meeting, and their husbands should support Tayyip Erdogan because he is considered as a religious leader, a man of God who was chosen. That's the understanding of Erdogan's actions and future grand plan, and he is basing his objectives and plans for such a future to lead the Islamic world, at least the Muslims who can support him and come after him. We can also consider Turkish activities in Africa from this perspective as well. Hello?
Hello, yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Yayla. So so far I understand that it's a de facto revival of the caliphate. Okay? Thank you.
So he doesn't call this as the caliphate because he understands that rhetoric can backfire, but what we see through his actions is basically the revival of an Islamist Turkey leading the regional Muslims, not only in the region in the Middle East, but also in Europe, even in the United States, with a cooperation coming from the Muslim Brotherhood, the largest Islamic group in the world. They fully support Erdogan. In fact, in 2000, I guess it was 2016, when the American Muslim Brotherhood establishments carried out a demonstration in front of the White House, they chanted as Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the leader of the Ummah, Ummah meaning the Islamic world. So one should ask why Muslim Brotherhood elements in the United States, from Palestine, from different Northern African countries, from different Arabic countries, are chanting Recep Tayyip Erdogan as the leader of the Ummah in front of the White House. This is the agenda. They are pushing Erdogan to be the leader of the Islamic world from their perspectives. And of course, Iran and Saudi Arabia are not going to accept that. And Erdogan is trying to balance his relationships with Iran, because Iran also understands that they are not going to be able to lead the Sunni Islamic world anyway. And Erdogan calls Iran as his second home. With Saudi Arabia, his calculations are, because Saudi Arabia is also another dictatorship, and because in most cases people under the rule of the Saudi kingdom are not happy with them, based on his calculations, he is going to be able to steer away people from the support of the Saudi regime. Of course, the Saudis are not idling. They are also carrying out different activities to counter Erdogan. But at this point, it seems that Erdogan has the moral and strategical ability, which is or opportunities which are higher than what the Saudis have, particularly after the killing of Khashoggi. So yes, Erdogan understands that he needs to revive some kind of caliphate so that he can stay in power, so that he is immune from justice.
Thank you, Dr. Yayla. Thank you. Ambassador Trigunayat, yeah. Can you hear me, Ambassador? Hello? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Sir, I'll just come back to you. Dr. Yayla raised some of the very issues regarding this whole de facto revival of the caliphate, and interestingly he also mentioned about some of the aid and charity organizations working in the US having like deep-rooted relations with Muslim Brotherhood and even with the Erdogan supporting them. I have personally researched some of these organizations. They have tie-ups with the Jamaat-e-Islami in India, which was recently banned in Kashmir. Besides that, some Salafi groups and PFI and all. So I mean, this is also a threat to India. Like, you know, our communal harmony, our social fabric, you know, might get disturbed. So I would just request you to just, you know, throw some light on this and what can we actually do to counter this threat. Before that, just one more announcement. We have Mr. C.D. Sahai with us. Mr. C.D. Sahai is the distinguished fellow with VIF, and he is the former chief of India's external intelligence agency, RNDW. Welcome, Sahai, sir. Hello.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
How are you, sir?
Happy to hear. If I was not stepping out, I would have fired a few questions at you, but then I always get the opportunity. But if you permit me, before you, since Abhinav has brought me in the picture, as it were, if you permit me, I just want to make a couple of points.
Please.
With your permission. Ambassador, you would recall that our relationship with Turkey has a long history, and yet during Vajpayee's years, we realized when he wanted to visit Turkey, we found there was no direct flight, there was no Air India flight, and nor was there any from the Turkish airline. And those things were negotiated. There was a lot of reservations about it, that who would like to go to to Istanbul or Turkey, or who would like to come to Delhi. But you know what happened, that Istanbul became the biggest hub for international traffic, originating not only from India, but from this entire region. And it was crushing. I myself visited Istanbul a number of times for under track group arrangements for discussions. Uh, so when everything was going so well, and to people like you and I and many in India, um, it's very difficult to understand why there is a sudden, kind of problem being seen everywhere. The other day, I think you were addressing a meeting, and Vivekanand had even posed a question to Ambassador Dinkar Srivastava about this China, China, Russia, Pakistan, Turkey now joining in, and Iran axis forming there, which could have implications, but it doesn't gel in the overall, in the context of the relationship we have had with some of these countries individually. And now we heard this evening about the revival of the caliphate and ISIS and hard right-wing Islamist issues, which we know has never found acceptance in our socio-cultural religious milieu. Where do you think these things fit in? Are these sort of just effervescent bubbles which will die out, or the Turkish president would find the compulsions of his internal politics so strong as to walk down a path which will not be good for, I'm not in a position to comment on for whether it's good for his country or not, but certainly not good for India-Turkey relations and the regional peace and amity. Internally, people do take positions, and but implications of some of these things which Dr. Yayla mentioned to be very, very worrying. So, in your intervention, if you could provide some comforting understanding of these problems. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. In fact, if you just listen to what Dr. Yayla said, and I also refer to it, that it is more to do not with Turkey per se, but more to do with Sultan Erdogan. It has his personal ambitions of becoming a religious leader, his personal ambitions of reviving history and trying to create this Ottomanic ambitions, give them a shape. And how does it come about? We think that it can come about by resorting to a religious leadership. And that is what it is trying to achieve. And it has a very strong organization, Muslim Brotherhood. And it has become a custodian of the Muslim Brotherhood nearly everywhere in the world. We have seen what happened in Egypt. Egypt and Muslim Brotherhood has something positive also about it. One thing is, when it was banned in Egypt, they went underground and they worked at the lowest possible, poorest people, worked with them and created some kind of a critical mass. So when an opportunity arose after the Arab Spring and the removal of Mubarak, they immediately came back with a very big bang. That is another fact, that they did not know how to deal with the politics, which is military-industrial complex in Egypt or Pakistan or elsewhere, including in Turkey. So even with Syria, if you see initially that he was pushing Assad to accommodate Muslim Brotherhood. In fact, there was a statement which Assad made that he wants to become, he belongs to the Muslim Brotherhood, and consequently, he believes if the situation change in Syria, Egypt, and Iraq, it may mean creation of a new sultanate, not Ottoman, but a sultanate for the Brotherhood, extending from the Atlantic to the Mediterranean and ruled by Erdogan. Now, this is something which is what Assad had said. We may discount it because they are on the other side now. At one time, they were working together and cohort. On the other hand, as far as India is concerned, if we see it, it is not from now. In 1996, actually, Erbakan, he founded this vigorous, and which is like the Turkish Muslim Brotherhood, and he facilitated the rise of a new military bloc of countries, in which Pakistan, of course, is very, very prominent. It included Libya, Iran, Egypt, Indonesia, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Malaysia. So, for its own leadership, it finds that in the OIC does not have that kind of attraction. So, it wanted, Erdogan wanted to create a very new organization with the Malaysians, with the Pakistanis, and with Indonesia and some other countries. Of course, it has not taken off, but it is not died down even. So Turkey has the potential. Secondly, Turkey is one country which is using its NATO advantage to the hilt by putting some kind of a paradox in the minds of the European allies who are there. They do not know what to do because Turkey remains extremely important strategically in their games to counter Russia. So that is very much which remains there, but he is playing both sides in my view. As far as India is concerned, we have seen that he made very openly, he and the Malaysian Prime Minister, when they in the UN and elsewhere, they have talked about Article 370, decried India, and in no uncertain terms. So obviously, that is something that has not gone down well. We have worked together in G20. Prime Minister Modi went there, had meetings and discussions with him. But I believe that his total game plan is more focused towards Middle East. And in South Asia, he is focused mainly on Pakistan and China. So you can see easily that currently Turkey's chips are all put together with China, Pakistan, and trying to create that kind of an axis which can counterbalance the growth in the Middle East. It directly impacts us because Iran today is no longer very sympathetic to India, as we have seen what has happened between China and Iran. Now they have found an alternate, open alternate in China. So we can continue normal economic relationship. There can be tourism because a lot of Indian films, as you rightly mentioned, a large number of people start going to it. Its airline is one of the best airlines said to be in Europe. So it is not that he's not done. I mean, the airport that is created is the largest airport in the world or something like that. So he has the basic essential ingredients and the strength there. But in my view, as you rightly mentioned, he is taking it in the wrong direction. And probably for this, to a great extent, I think the European Union is also responsible. Had they tried to integrate him, as was the case, perhaps his approaches could have been slightly different. But they feel somewhat disrespected and tried to give back in the same point. So we will have to be very cautious in dealing with Turkey, and I think we have already taken the direct approaches on that. We have taken certain, certain agreements have been put on hold, including purchases of some military equipment from Turkey, and they'll have to realize, and I doubt very much that Erdogan will do that, but they have to realize that if they claim to be a democracy of time, they should try to be on the side of the democracy rather than trying to undermine it. So I do not see that we are going to have any great hunky-dory relationship with Turkey, or Turkey can be weaned away from Pakistan in the near future. I don't see that. That's unfortunately a very pessimistic picture, but that is true in my view.
You really, thank you, Ambassador Trigunayat. You pointed out some of the diplomatic obstacles, or I would say straight jams, which we are facing as far as Turkey is concerned. But I would just like to mention that recently I had written a paper, and in my research, I found that it is not just at the diplomatic level that Sultan Erdogan is approaching, but even like he is reaching out to the Muslim clerics in India, even at the imams at the lowest levels, to the Muslim youth in India, the politicians in India. And the agenda is not just a soft power extension. I mean, it has some very hidden motives which makes you uncomfortable. Like when he was elected again, there were jubilant celebrations right from Kerala to the villages of UP, which is really disturbing for us. And Dr. Yayla rightly pointed out about those charity organizations, because these are the conduits through which such operations are channelized and handled. So we really need to worry about all these things. Okay? Thank you once again. Dr. Yayla, before we wind up, I just have a one small or a concluding question to you. Uh, I think both of you, Ambassador Trigunayat, and you also pointed out that there's this new generation coming up in Turkey, which is atheist. Besides that, Dr. Yayla, you pointed out that the core support group of President Erdogan is 30% or 20%. Then you have 20% nationalists. So is there any possibility, even a remotest possibility of Turkish Spring or Baklava Spring, where these atheists come up and they just say, well, get the hell out of here. We want a new secular and a modern Turkey with the Sufi
So
Islam.
at this point, it is very difficult because Erdogan controls almost all of the media. If you think about like the mainstream TV stations, papers, and other publications, almost all of it. There are no opposing mediums where people can hear the different points, the opposing points of against Erdogan's activities. So by controlling the media, it is as if almost Erdogan is controlling the mindset of the people who are supporting him, maybe other than the young generations, as they call like Generation Z, which happened like a few weeks ago during a social media presence. Thousands of them protested Erdogan. But he also has a plan for that. Now they are passing a new law to limit the social media in Turkey. So he can control all the media in Turkey, all the TV stations, papers, but he cannot control the social media other than shutting down accounts here and there. But now he intends to control the social media as well. So if you are controlling the communication mediums of the opposition, if you are suppressing the facts, the truth, if you are pumping lies to the people all the time, constantly, people cannot think truly. So through the control of the media, through his aid to the public who are supporting him by using different means, he is kind of getting a hold of that base. And they still support him considering the fact that he is the leader. So therefore, it would be very naive to think that people would uprise against Erdogan and tell him, we are fed up with you, go away. It's not going to happen. If there is an attempt, he is going to suppress that very violently. He hired thousands of new police officers loyal to him. So if we look at the current Turkish judicial system, Turkish security forces, Turkish military forces, they are almost all loyal to him. He fired and replaced half of the Turkish military generals by using the coup as a pretext. So when we look at the high-ranking officials in the Turkish security forces, in the Turkish military forces, they are loyal to Erdogan. The judicial system is a puppet at the hands of Erdogan. The Turkish national intelligence is the biggest tool of Erdogan. Therefore, he very cleverly, over the years, got a hold of all those institutions that would be vital for his survival. And now, at this point, he is at the peak of his power, and it would be impossible for a social movement to change the course in Turkey because he is going to violently suppress such a movement. So I do not expect a Turkish spring, if you mean, if you are meaning from that question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yayla. Thank you. I think we would have loved to continue with this discussion. This is really interesting for any passionate IR scholar or a counterterrorism scholar, but we have time constraints. And I would also like to apologize to our audience because of the time constraint today. We cannot take the questions, but it was wonderful to have you both, Dr. Yayla and Ambassador Trigunayat, here as our panelists. And thanks once again for the most enlightening and wonderful discussion on this most critical issue. With this, and thank you, Bipendraji. He is our host, and he's a very important person in organizing these events. So I would like to extend my thanks. Thank you very much to all the participants. So I would like to end the event here. Once again, thank you, and have a wonderful day, Dr. Yayla, and have a wonderful night to our Indian audience.
Thank you very much.